This month's topic, artifacts, is meant to club together all sorts of random objects which sometimes don't fit into one or the other category. Like we have distinct categories for portraits, landscape, urban sketching, travel, food, flowers, animals, but often there will be these objects which are many of them and they're very beautiful, but unless we make the effort to draw them, we'll end up not knowing how to make them. And then there'll be a day when you want to, say, document a visual trip through a museum, and you will see all these historic artifacts, or you are sitting at a cafe and you have this beautiful coffee pot that you want to illustrate, and you are at a complete loss because it does not fit into any of the stuff that we've done before. So that's why every year I put all the artifacts in one unit. So they will have a whole range of shapes, colors, textures, different materials, and in fact it's like insects. You have millions of types of insects. In that same way, you have millions of types of artifacts, which then help you to study in detail each of these little things. So we have things like metal surfaces, metallic surfaces, glass, wood, then just dry walls or brick and things like that. So it's like everything else, which is like so much you study and then you have the rest of the world to explore. So I wanted to start with something really basic, how to create cylindrical objects. And the more you illustrate, the more you realize that everything in the world, and I hazard to say everything in the universe, can be drawn if you know how to manipulate just 3 or 4 basic elements of drawing. So you have just the basic 2-dimensional shapes, which is a circle, square, triangle, and a line. And then you have 3-dimensional versions of the same. So you have a sphere, you have a cylinder, you have a cube, and you might have some kind of pyramidal shape. And everything else is just like, take these shapes and lop off a little bit, then you get a hemisphere. Then you lop off a little from the squares, you will get a rectangular cube. So it's all these basic shapes and then little parts of that. So I want you to start seeing these shapes in basic objects, and the same shapes you will see in everything else. Like you will see these objects in faces, you will see them in trees, or you'll see them in say buildings or food. So everything can be seen as a basic shape. So the pictures that I've shared today, they will have just forms of cylinders and variations of cylinders. I'll go over the images with you right now. So in this case, we have all different types of cylinders. You have one basic cylinder for the body, and then you have another cylinder which is like a tapering cylinder for the spout, another kind of cylinder for the lid, then another cylinder for the knob on the lid, and then another cylinder which becomes the handle, and yet another cylinder which becomes the metallic handle, the ears of the handle itself. So it's surprising, once you break it down, you realize that this is just one shape and it's just expanded into all its possibilities. Once you start seeing that, then even over here you will see that this is also a tapering cylinder. Here you could say the lid is a hemisphere, and this the spout could be what looks like a cube or cuboid shape, which is again tapering because it does not seem to have a round cross section. And then of course the handle is again a manipulated cylinder. So once you can see those shapes in the simpler objects, you will start seeing certain variations, certain flourishes added to the same shapes. But essentially, it will be the same component that will be used up. Here, the material changes, and here it becomes the same material becomes a little more elaborate. Now, I have a feeling that this is an illustration already, because suddenly I noticed that there is somebody's signature here. But it's so well done, I was mistaken. But nonetheless, we will illustrate this as well. And then we can probably discuss how the madman has been able to create this so realistically. I don't know why I'm assuming that's a man, it could be a woman also. Okay, so I'll start you off with just first becoming comfortable with drawing cylinders, different types of cylinders, visualizing those cylinders, and then adapting those cylinders. Now, as people start joining in, I'll repeat the same process, and that will be good for you as well, because there will be some things that you will register in the beginning, and focusing on those 3 out of 5 things, you might forget the other two, so that the more we repeat during class, it just starts becoming a thing that you don't have to remember consciously anymore. Sorry. All right, so we can try. So on this page, we are going to create a composition of all the kettles that I have shared with you. So on the back of this page, we will do some cylinder drawing practice. So just with a regular pencil, we are going to make these drawings, and this is to warm your hand and eye and brain up. So do not use an eraser if you can control yourself. Had you been in class with me right now, I would have confiscated everyone's erasers. So just imagine that I'm right there, and every time you use an eraser, imagine my frowning face. So the easiest way to draw cylinders is of course to create two oval shapes and join the sides. But even drawing that oval sometimes can be a little bit of a challenge. Often we will draw an oval that might be too round or too irregular, or we might land up making an oval which is like this and like this with pinched edges on this side. So we can make something that's in between these. Ashwita is coming. Okay, just let's give her a minute, and she can also join this. Hi Ashwita. Is she still connecting? Yeah. I think she would probably rejoin. Okay, let's start off with just this bit, and I'll repeat again with her. So one way to guarantee a good oval if you're not in the practice of making oval is just observe this. Start with 2 dots to mark the width of the oval you want to make, and on the sides just make a couple of very small vertical lines, and then you can make an oval like this arc from the bottom part of the line, from the bottom point, and then from the top to the top. So this ensures that even if you make a very shallow oval, you will always have a much more, I guess, a correct shape to the oval, because you will not fall into this pinching of the edges trap. Ashwita, we are making these in the back of the page that we are going to draw in, so that the final page will have a whole composition of kettles over here. But I want to just warm up your hand to draw cylinder shapes. So I'll go over this again. We have drawn two dots, made two very small vertical lines on either side, and then drawn two arcs on both sides. Then from the sides we will just draw two lines parallel to each other and ensure that the bottom is parallel to the bottom part of the oval. Now it seems like a no-brainer exercise once it's broken down like that, but often I have come across students who get a little confused when drawing uh, cylinders. So one is that you might pinch the edges, then you might draw the base like this, and of there are cases when they would also make the bottom a straight line, because somewhere in your head you think that if this is a glass, it is sitting on a flat surface, so this will be flat, but visually it's an oval, and often that the bottom oval is a little rounder than the top. But for our purpose right now, we are going to create an oval such that the top and the bottom lines are parallel curves. Do you want to try making this?
Hi. So we're just doing shape, just basic shape.
Yeah. So first we'll
Ah,
just make a bunch of these shapes, and then we'll just put them all together and make those kettles. And regarding what we do these artifacts for, once the other people join in, then I'll just repeat what I spoke with Kiara about, so you know the purpose behind this topic. Hold the book, Ashitaya. Now the same thing, you can change the dimensions and get different types of ovals. Now this vertical line thing, if you understood it, you need not draw it every time. Basically, we want to have the sides of the oval distinct, not invisible. Simply because on the sides, what happens is foreshortening. Like I will show you a circle like this, but as I tilt the circle, the sides don't disappear. They just become flatter. That is what's happening. And this flat side will often look like a straighter line rather than a curve. So I don't want you to get too confused with the technicalities. So making those sides a little vertical, and by little I mean really, really little. It's just imperceptible little, but it's still there. So we can change the proportions and make different types of cylinders, and this becomes very easy to do. And you can change the orientation of your oval and create cylinders in other directions. And likewise, you can also convert this into a tapering cylinder, which would be like taking a cone and cutting the top off. For that matter, if you want to, you can now even extend these lines, make the top lines of a cone, and what could have been a triangle can now become a three-dimensional triangle, which would be a cone. The purpose behind drawing these shapes is to understand how the shape itself is seen through various orientations. So when you look at an object from the side, this object is going to look like a isosceles triangle. This object is going to look like a rhombus, or I think this is called a rhombus. This object is going to look like a rectangle, and so on and so forth. So the moment you tilt it, then you can start seeing the curve. And if you need to add dimension to this curve, like more three dimensionality, then even the rule of perspective will apply here. By the rules of perspective, this is how a circle will change depending upon where you look at that circle from. The circle in question is this cross section. So if you look at it from the side, that circle is a line. It's flat. If you look at it from the top, that circle is a complete circle. From the bottom, that circle is a complete circle as well. So can you imagine what happens as that circle travels from looking at it from the top, then on the side, and then the bottom? So this circle, if you can imagine, keeps becoming flatter. The sides will remain exactly the same. And this keeps becoming flatter as it starts approaching the horizon line. So this is the horizon line. Horizon lines are our eye level actually. So I've just arbitrarily drawn this. But you get the idea of how things will change depending upon where you look at it from. So when you have an object that you're looking sharply or very close, the same cylinder could easily have like, okay, let me go back on this a little bit. Horizon line is where your eye is. So if your eye is over here and your circular object is below you, this is how you will see it. You will see the top as a horizontal or a flattened circle, and then if you take this further down, this part can be very round. So it's not just the top circle that becomes or the top oval that becomes a round. The object itself can also look distorted, where one end of the object can look one way and the other end of the object can look another way, and no longer are these two parallel. So I just want to bring this to your attention. I don't need you to learn this by heart or create or get lost in the theory of these things. Okay, so these things, once you know it, when you look at the objects that we have to draw right now, you will look for what is happening in those objects. So let's look at our reference images and try and draw one. So when studying these objects, you will notice that depending upon the curve you see, you can kind of predict how the oval cross section would look. Cross section would be the wrong word. I think what I could probably say is over here I'm going by the oval shape made by this side of the rim, not the top. The top is just coincidentally matching this blue line. This bottom part is what I'm concerned about to explain this. And here also I have a little rim. This is the bottom part on the rim, and this is the side. So I'm going to make an oval here. So this oval sits somewhere like this. Okay, if this object were transparent, this is how the oval would look. If I were to compare this, it should be parallel, right? But you notice that they're not. Oh, they are. They look very parallel, but the sides are wider. I would have expected the bottom oval to be rounder, but it's not. So, in this case, I guess the view is such that there is no distortion between the oval on top and the oval at the bottom. Okay, so like I said, it's not a rule, but it is a factor to observe. Sometimes when you have a very rounded bottom, you could be very close to the subject, so that if I were to hold the glass in front of me, I would see this part very flat because it's very close to my horizon line, and here I can almost see a round bottom of that same glass. And if the photo is clicked from really far away, everything starts looking much more parallel. Alright, so now that we know this, let us try and employ the technique of drawing just the ovals like we have drawn and recreate this yellow teapot. But you can turn the page over and draw it on the other side if your hand is sufficiently warmed up. So when you're starting this, I'm not giving you the proportions right now, but there is a certain proportion. It's always good to start with basic shapes, like I was saying. Start with a square first or a rectangle. You can draw the square or rectangle or according to the proportion of part of the object or around the whole object, whatever you feel like it. But the way I see it, the bottom is more a rectangle than a square. So I've made it a little wide. I'm just measuring this visually. Then we have the lid, which covers about so much space, and then we have a center line running through this. That will help me figure out how tall the lid will go. Oh, one second, my lines are looking crooked because the phone is tilted. Yeah, okay, better. Now at this point, again from here, I could probably go this high and then draw a square or rectangle for the top. And then about this high, I have the handle, which will be somewhere here. This is obviously a rectangle. In fact, the handle comes almost up to the sides of the lid itself. And then I have the metal handle itself. This is more or less the proportion I can visually see. Being able to visually make out proportions is also pretty important. Now that I have just some markers, I can begin. I usually like to begin in the middle and then spread outward. But this is a very personal choice. So if you feel more comfortable making things from the top to bottom, you can do that as well. But remember that in art there is no top or bottom. You can go from any place. There's no linearity. So let's start with the lid, for example. Over here we have a horizontal line at the top of the lid, a slight dome on top, then the sides come elegantly down and almost create a compound curve on top. So this is the wooden part of the lid. I'm being very careful about the degree that I curve each line with. Then I'm creating the lid. Now looks like my lid has become too wide, so even if I have drawn this shape, I can always edit the shape. Once I draw the first shape, like in this case this is the knob on the lid, this becomes my unit. And the way I'm seeing the picture, the edge of the lid is just a little, maybe the same height or the same length as the height of this knob. So I'm taking my line inward over here so much. Again, only visually. I will be showing you how to make a grid for this as well. And we can also explore other ways of drawing. Now I'm comfortable with this, so I will proceed. So one of these classic mistakes, which is as you develop further, you'll just face palm so many times saying, this is so logical, I don't know why I didn't think about it, is to assume that the rough lines that you've drawn are correct. They are rough lines. They are meant to just give you some idea of what you want to draw, where you want to draw it in blank space. It's like an assumption. So you need to verify if what you have seen is right or not. So in all probability, 90% of your grid lines or your um, uh, guidelines might be changeable. I won't say they are wrong, because if you don't have them, you will not know where to draw the correct line. So you should never consider them wrong. They are the first thing that you can see and draw with, but they have only that much value. So don't feel so sympathetic towards them that you say, oh, now that I've drawn you, I must make you part of the fair illustration also. I keep saying this all the time. Pencil lines or pencil guidelines are not like lines on stone. They are not a commitment. They are there to support you. They're like a good friend who, even if you don't call for a week, they're not going to be completely incensed and say, how did you not even call me? Okay. So allow the guidelines to show you how um, how the correct line must be drawn. When you're drawing the spout, the first thing to do is use some measure on the body of the kettle and draw another guideline extruding out and at least giving you the height at which that kettle's the spout must come. Similarly, make some more guidelines. Notice up to what point on the side the cylinder of the spout is attached, and with each line try to gauge the distance of the line and the angle of the line. At this point, again, I'm evaluating where I should draw the wooden handle. This is too close, I feel, so I'm going to extend the line a little further. And the thickness of this wooden handle is a little more than the thickness of this part of the knob on the lid. So all I need to do is draw the two gentle curves and attach them on both sides by convex curves in such a way that the end of that handle comes right above the edge of the lid, or a little inside will also be fine. But I'm quite happy with this. Okay, do you want me to continue or do you want me to wait? Now, when there are multiple curves, if we draw this fully and then draw the other one, there are chances that you might not get that correctly. So, my strategy is to break that up. I will draw one curve, sure, but I'll first also draw guidelines for that. So, where are the parallel lines? Draw straight lines on both sides because they're much easier to draw, and they give us a good scaffolding on which now I can curve my handle
Repeat how
line.
you did that. I
Up.
didn't get that.
Sorry, this part.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
The
so I made a short horizontal line here, a vertical line which has the same thickness, and another horizontal line on top. So I got this parallel line grid.
okay.
Then on top of that, I think this could be a flattened, it's not looking very cylindrical to me. So I have an inside edge that's here and an outside edge which is here. But it just goes around this shape. So I can turn my line on the corner like this. Rather than trying to get this shape without any guidelines, I prefer to use the guidelines and then get that shape. It's much simpler that way. And then there's a third line which is the edge. Right. So this is one way of drawing a kettle, and this could also easily, you can foresee, be used to design a kettle because you know all the components. There are maybe 5 components. You have a body, a lid, the lid will have a knob, a spout, some kind of handle, which could be just one object or it could be two. Very often, kettles that have this kind of a hanging handle on hinges will have some other material to hold it on top. Because of sheer physics, the body is going to become really hot, and you don't want to burn your hands when you pick up the kettle. So this will have another material. So you have material and object one, two, three, with two materials, 4 and 5. Okay, now let's try using something similar to draw the red kettle. Now for the red kettle, I want to show you a few tricks using the internal geometry. So like I said, The first thing to do is break everything down into basic shapes. So in this case, now we can break the lid down to a circle, and perhaps you can just use this as a unit and see how many such circles we might need to make for to achieve the height. So we have 1, 2, and maybe 2.5. Let's see, I'm just going to pull this line further. This is something that you can even draw on WhatsApp or even your iPhone phone. So here's the third measure, and if I were to split this, so it's almost 2.5 times the circle. Yeah, the body of the kettle is 1, 2, and a little short of half of the diameter of the circle. And the circle gives us, or the semicircle will actually give us the lid. Once we have this, we can change the other measurement. So right below, or let's see at what point, 1.5, this can be again, if I halve this, so somewhere at 1.5 times the circle, a little above that you have the spout, and a little below you have the bottom of the handle. And here in this case, where the handle comes and joins the body, a little above that you have the top edge of the spout. The open end of the spout is actually at the level of the open end of the kettle itself. I think this is almost always the case, and I had never known this before till I started just drawing a line. I would often either make the open mouth till maybe somewhere here or all the way up there. But if you think about it logically, if the spout is lower than the opening of the kettle, the moment the kettle fills up, it will start coming out of the spout. So it has to be at least the height of the opening, so that when you fill your tea up till here, it still is only up till this point in the spout. How dumb, thank goodness I did not do physics. I would have been useless. Alright, so after this is just drawing different angles. I'll change the color so we can see better. We establish a vertical line, and that will again help us to decide how much the to what extent do we extend the same measurement outward. Since all of this is fairly equal basic shapes, I can possibly assume that the handle is 1/2 of the circle to the right, and the spout could be, how much would it be? I'm just going to draw this 1/2 line and bring it to the other side and see whether it matches. So the spout is a little short. Now we can, if we really want to nerd out on this, keep splitting this further and further into halves and thirds to get the exact measurement of where each point should go. And believe me, as tedious as this looks, when you are drawing this, it just makes your life so easy. Like now in this case, I will, where do we draw the hinges? It's at whatever this distance is. So if this is half of the circle, this is quarter, the circle goes through 1/8 of this circle measurement on the right hand side. Hannah, do you get it? Now, okay, look at this also. This nice ridge on the base is exactly at 2 times the circle, so half time from the bottom. It's brilliant. So I'm going to share this picture with you so that we can keep referring to this and make the most perfect little kettle possible.
I don't know why, but those drawing by grid things which used to have like um, what do you call them? Make it larger, magnify.
Yeah.
Those used to drive me nuts.
So that technique is brilliant, by the way, and it has been used a lot. So what the way I approach it is from the other end. A grid, when you draw things with a grid, one advantage is that you can scale it up and down, like you said. You can draw a picture at, once you have a picture and you put an equidistant grid on it, say 1 inch by 1 inch, you can draw it at 1 inch by 1 inch, that is 1:1 scale, or you can change the scale and enlarge it. So you can take 1 inch and each 1 inch shape converts into a 4 inch shape or 10 inch shape or whatever. So that's really good when you have to do portraiture or something. But when it comes to objects, I've found that every object in itself also has its own geometry if you look for it hard enough. Some objects which are very ornate, there you can just get some basic outline of the shape or basic proportion, but that ornate stuff will just drive you nuts if you have to do this. But theoretically, it is possible. But when I do something like this, we don't really need to be dependent on drawing that grid at all. You just take whatever feature you find and say, if this is my unit, how can I see it in different ways in this object itself, just using those same basic shapes. So now we can start with drawing the circle. I'm going to draw that kettle over here a little to the side. We don't need to draw all the measurements the way we started drawing them. At this point, it's just going to be more convenient to draw the circle first. But otherwise, it's not. Okay, another thing is you can always measure how much space you have and how much you need. So since we need 2.5 times the circle, you can measure beforehand. Just use your fingers, just measure andazya say whether your kettle is fitting here at all or not. And you can easily measure 2.5 from the top or 2.5 from the bottom also, doesn't matter. So now I'm going to measure it from the top and draw your circles fairly loose. That circle is just a guideline. Draw a line running through half and then vertical. So the sequence in which you draw the lines also doesn't have to be the way we've drawn it in the study. The next line you draw doesn't have to be a circle. You can just measure the circle and draw a line to indicate where the same unit is ending on the bottom, and then divide that in half. Somewhere over here you will get the base. So you draw a horizontal line first so you know where it stands. This is 1, 2.5, and I've drawn another line on top where the base of the kettle is going to be. Now I'll draw 2 lines vertically from the sides. I haven't measured how far the kettle goes on the side, but if we look at the measurement of the spout, which is, we will draw 1/2 of the circle or a half measure on the left, break that into, this is a little less than half, so if I were to draw half here a little less than half, a little more than that, half a quarter. Expand this line, expand this line. Then you get a point for the handle on the left and a point for the spout on the left, right, and then spout on the left. And then you see how the spout curves. We have drawn another line which was maybe a little higher than half of the bottom hemisphere. That gives us where the spout comes and joins the body a little on top. This is where the handle will come. Now we need to know where the bottom of the how wide the bottom of the teapot becomes also. So now that we've drawn this spout, drop a line from that inside edge of the spout, and now visually check if the kettle comes, the wide edge of the kettle comes right underneath that, or a little inside, or a little outside. I've drawn it a little inside, but you draw what you see. And if we've drawn it right, you'll notice that this edge comes outside of our vertical line at precisely the place where we want it to be. That's how you verify whether your lines are correct or not. Once you have these edges, you can now draw the curve. This curve at the bottom, right now we have to draw it visually. How much it curves to you. Here also, we have draw a curve. This is that little indent. In this kettle, you'll notice that the lid is almost a horizontal line. It peeps out from this edge in the silhouette. And then you have the lid with a nice oval shaped knob, an oval with flat edges on top. Then we have the hinge. And now when we want to draw the handle, it's a very cute shape, but don't be tempted to just draw that shape. Break it up into flat lines. So this is like a year. So you draw one horizontal line, one line at 45 degree, another vertical line, break it up. I don't know if you remember in geometry, the definition, I couldn't remember, I couldn't believe that every three-dimensional object also has a definition. Or like a line also has a definition. What is a line? A line is something that joins 2 points or the shortest distance between 2 points or something like that. At that time I couldn't appreciate it, but you know how that helps is that you realize that a curve can be drawn by just creating the tangents that compose it. We don't have to get into so much technicality, but I'm just saying that if you see just the straight line, you will be able to even draw the curve much more accurately. So now we have found two different ways of drawing, one with just basic visual measurement, one creating a basic visual proportionate measurement, then drawing guidelines. Mind you, these are still just guidelines. Once you're comfortable with this, you can go back to the original image. And now we can finalize our shape. Since this is also a symmetrical object, remember how we drew this? We did this in insects, na, last month. When you draw one side, immediately draw the other side. I don't think it's not very symmetrical, but I'm just letting it go. And here, although I have made a straight line for the edge of the lid and the lip of the top end, I've made a slight curve because I do see that there is a curve there. The lip on the body of the kettle is a separate line, it's like a rim. And every joint has a rounded edge to make it a little cuter, I suppose. There's a slight curve to the bottom of the spout, and in this case I have a feeling that I can make the indent, or the, it's not an indent, whatever it is, slightly higher, pull up the base a little bit as well. Now these straight lines, when you're drawing them, when you are making the uh, rough lines, you can just hold the pencil a little far away and just draw a long line. When you're drawing it in fair, you can draw it as a broken line which you just extend further and further and further. So if you're drawing broken lines, make them go one on top of the other. You draw one and then start a little behind that line and extend it and extend it and extend it. That's always better. Now in this case, remember the rules that the opening of our kettle is looking almost flat, the bottom is looking almost round. So when you make the curve of this indent here, that should not be rounder than the base, should not be flatter than the top. It should be somewhere in between. Mine has become a little rounder, but if it looks incorrect, let it be, because then you will be able to see it that way.
Actually, it's not looking incorrect. Mine, which is exactly this, almost same, is looking funny. But yours, which is flat on the top and more curved down, is looking more right. So
Yeah. To me, it's looking a little weird, but that's I think because I'm too attached to the, like, I'm closer to the subject. Everything looks better from far away. So drawing curves is a challenge, huh? And the only way you can become confident is doing these kinds of warm-up exercises. Draw all sorts of curves, looking this side, looking that side. Only then it starts looking good. Right. So if you're comfortable with this, we will try painting the kettle, the bottom kettle.
the spout of this one, the orange one,
Mm-hmm.
has a kind of thickness to it. Like I don't know how to explain. Like it has a dimension, no? That is only through the shading, right?
Correct.
There's no pencil line to show the.
No. If you want to, you can make a pencil line where you see a sharpness, like somewhere over here, but leave
Yeah.
it as that. Don't make it too sharp on the top. So automatically this will look like it's headed there. But don't worry, now we are going to make the shadows. So exactly at the center there is a shadow. And then there are these highlights. So highlights often are are literally reflections of the contour of that object. So if you have an object that is very slender, the contour shape is slender, then the highlight would also be slender. But that we see it, so you don't really again have to memorize. Now, in the case of the semi-sphere, hemisphere on top, you look at how weird that highlight is. You have a highlight on the right, then you have a shadow that's a convex curve on the left part, and then there's another highlight on the left, and around that there's almost like a slight glow. Then we have a highlight on the handle and a little bit of a highlight on the rim and the bottom part on the right. So let me just go get my colors and we'll try painting this. Okay, so a subject like this, when we have to paint this, we can create this color variation uh, in two washes, but make the color within the wash itself. So I'm going to mix up a couple of colors here. Obviously, we want a nice reddish orange shade. So I have gamboge and orange in one section. This is going to be what I'm going to begin with, a slightly light orange to give me the highlight. And on the other side, I have scarlet, to which I am adding orange as well. So the orange color will continue from the lighter side to the darker side, and its companion pigment will change from gamboge to scarlet. Now, the reason for doing this is I found that when there is a color blend in an object, it's obviously the same color that is either lighter or darker. When painting, if we use two separate colors, very often the two different pigments merge with some kind of a shock in between. But then if we have one color that is, it's like two friends, two random people on the street, if they have one person in common, then the conversation becomes a lot easier. So the orange is going to become that common friend for our colors. And we start off with orange on the right, and as we come towards the left, we will change the color to the orange and scarlet. So I want you to just observe how I'm painting this. I'm going to be making it as a wash, so my colors are reasonably runny. I'm using a number 10 brush, but you can use a number 8 or a number 6, but keep it a slightly largish brush. Do not use a number 4 or anything below number 6. The colors should be nice and runny, and the quantity of the colors should be such that they should at least be able to do this area once, if not more than that. So here's how I'm doing it. I'm holding my book tilted a little bit. Maybe just observe how I move my brush around because you'll know the colors. That's not the part that you will goof up on if you do, but it's the application. So I am deliberately leaving some parts unpainted, like some parts even on the rim unpainted. And the consistency of the paint is such that it will collect towards the bottom here. That gives me enough time to go back and forth and paint consciously so that I know where I want to leave certain parts unpainted. So coming towards the 1/3 mark. So as long as you have this edge wet, you can literally go go buy your bhaji and come back and nothing is gonna happen. Now I have changed the color and I'm slowly going to add the second color which has a little bit of scarlet in it. Every time I do this also I will hydrate my brush and I will continue to darken this color. Now this is the first wash, so don't panic if you feel that it's not becoming dark enough. Here again I'm going back to my orange and gamboge, but it's all going to merge. How to paint. So I'm just taking fresh scarlet and orange. Ideally I should not have run out of paint, but it's okay now. As you become proficient, you won't take so long, but again, it's better to go slower wherever you can because you can take better decisions that way. Now there's ample paint in my brush, so I'm just going to pull that all up towards the spout. So tilting the book really helps. Now, if I feel that this is too much paint, I can wipe my brush and pick up excess paint. But I'm just going to allow that paint to settle in the space. Maybe tilt it in the other direction as well so that it just smoothly sits where it is supposed to sit. Anyway, this set is dark, so it won't really matter. And I get a nice blend, which I will wait till it dries, and then if need be, I will go over it one more time. Okay, do you want to try it? Cool. Take your time when you paint. When you're painting this now, resist the temptation to go back and correct anything. This is the first layer. Even if everything just lands up looking like it's one color, let it be. As long as it is light, we can always make more layers on this and change this. So here's the thing about watercolor. As much as that whole fear about you have to know where the highlights are, and if you don't know it the first time round, you've messed it, and then you can never correct things, all that is rubbish. There, you don't need to correct it. There are so many ways in which you can recreate the illusion you want. So, the last thing you want to do is panic with wet paint around. It needs to settle down. Once it settles, it's so watercolor is like a very peaceful medium. It once it settles, it lightens a little bit and uh, preps the base to receive even more color. And it really enjoys the interaction between water and paper. So this whole, um, I often think of watercolor like a whole bunch of kindergarten kids. When you take them to a garden, you cannot ask them to stand in line, sit down quietly. Why take them to the garden in the first place? You leave them loose over there and they are a riot. Then you have to just sit back and enjoy that riot. And then don't say, oh, you should not do this, you should not do that. So, the whole joy of watercolor is how freely the color enjoys playing on the surface of the paper. So, in the event as we proceed, if there are some colors that forget their boundaries and go inside, some other colors are still wet and then they merge, those are beautiful accidents. They are not meant to be controlled. In that, you will start seeing the there's an element of surprise and joy and almost suspended reality that comes through when those mergers, unexpected mergers happen. So anything to related to art is more about tricking the brain. That is what we are trying to do. If we had wanted to make, now of course it's even easier to say that. If we want to make a picture that's exactly like this kettle, you can click a picture of the kettle. But what we're trying to do is create an impression of the kettle and trick the brain into thinking that this bunch of lines in this form with this color is a red colored kettle which has light from this side, has shadow on this side. That is what we're doing. Right, now while the left part of our picture dries, the right part the right side, which is the other metal handle and hinge, we are going to color with a very generic gray. So my gray is the color you get when you mix all your leftover paints in the palette. You will get some really dirty brownish grayish color. If your palette is clean, then you can create this gray by mixing any of the deep blues like Balt or ultramarine, burnt umber, and black. In various combinations, you will get a range of grays. So you will get a warm gray, a cool gray. You can also add a green sometimes, and you will get a slightly greenish looking gray. So this gray can be the base for our handle and hinge. And again, when we are applying this, you can put a watery shade and dodge wherever you don't see that color. I'm using a number one brush for this application because the area is very tiny and I'm pretty much uniformly applying this color except where I see a highlight. Now, at a more advanced stage, when this color is wet, you can drop in a little bit of orange on the top left, and you'll see the reflection of the kettle in the handle. All I've done is in wet paint, I've just dropped in a little bit of this kettle color. Same color is also over here at the base of the hinge. On the gray again, we can draw the ring around the bolts of the hinge. And that's our basic layer one. Beyond this point, everything we paint is going to be, if it's not another base coat layer, then it's going to be something that is going to create or enhance the shadows, because we've already indicated the highlights and the lighter sections. The spout of my kettle is still a little wet. Now I can take a medium sized brush and go back into my red and orange or scarlet and orange mix and use a lightest shade. Don't make it too thick, the paint. Here I can create sharper shadows. So again, I want you to just observe this. There is a sharp edge to the shadow on the left hand side, right? So I'll draw that. Then there is a little shadow like that on the left of the rim, and then it's pretty much a uniform shade throughout. Don't paint, just observe this. As I come towards the center, I can't draw a sharp shadow here, it'll look too graphic. So I will wipe my brush and with the damp brush just pull that edge down. Again wipe the brush if I need to and pull the edge and make it smooth. Still become a little sharp over here, but again don't fiddle with wet paint, let it dry. We can do this a second time round. Repeating the same process at the bottom. It's a little deep here. And then there's a dark shadow in the center. Again, damp brush on this side, damp brush on this side, and leave it, let it do its thing. So with every subsequent layer, you need to paint something less or paint something else. And that will start creating more depth to the painting. As we become more advanced, some of these strokes or some of these sections you will paint while the previous color is damp. But we don't need to do that kind of bungee jumping today. Every little bit will get a little bit of shadow here or there, and that should start making it look more three-dimensional. So the same thing on the top as well. I'm literally painting a semicircle shape which I will diffuse using that damp brush technique. So at the end you realize that along with knowing where to put the color, you must also develop a very light hand and a very subtle application of paint. This manner of mechanically painting is very unnecessary in watercolor. Your hand would just be flying, putting all sorts of paint, and everything is very fluid. But in the beginning, if you have some processes, it helps. At least you know that there is a step, you know, within the step, what are the different fractions you have to pay attention to. And I think that a lot of students have benefited from that. And over time, it's like writing. First, you write really slowly, but then now you can really write fast and recreate better. We repeat the same process even for the handle, and this time round again paint something else or paint something less. You will start seeing shadows in other places, so you just place paint over there. And by now, if you noticed, your color also might have become a little thicker than when we mixed it, which is a good thing because at this stage a slight opaqueness to the color will really work for our picture. And I'm using the same color but maybe with a little extra black for that rim. Hope this is dried. The bottom rim, or the rim at the bottom of the lid, which is the top of the body. That protrudes from the side just a little bit too. Now here's something that I do is some shadows can also be painted in a completely different color than you see over here. At this stage, our teapot looks pretty much like what we see in the photograph. But I'm going to now make that three-dimensional fold in the lip using, in the spout using blue. So I'm going to make this stroke like so. And this blue will lighten up and give us exactly the kind of shadow that we wanted. The same blue I can also use on top of some of the colors in the handle and the hinge. So there is no blue, and you might argue that why do we add a completely unnecessary or different color. So these shades, they will not appear in their pure form, but when you put them on the existing picture, they change their form and just add to the illusion of shadow, because in this case this is a complementary color to the red and orange, so it just makes the shadows a little deeper. And if you really want to like the true, this is not like even bungee jumping, this is like the base jumping of painting, we could also, don't do this, I'm gonna do it. I mean, don't try this at home. But I want to show you how it looks if I take the same blue patch and apply it over here. See how it changes it, and it will look like blue, no doubt, but there is an element of surprise here that is undeniable, and it can really lift the picture up. I'll put some blue here as well. And the last bit we can do is take some cerulean blue and create a shadow underneath. So this shadow can be, because the light is from the right, just taking this shape from the bottom, and I will swirl it around towards the left. Although the reference image shows us a very long shadow, that interferes with our composition. So I'll just make a oval shape on the left. Go back to our oval shapes, and then that's it. Again, a blue shadow is very unusual, but it keeps your painting light and fun. So I have shown you only one layer of each application of these colors, but you can always go over the base coat, the second layer, and also the third layer to make the painting much richer in its tones.
I do have one question though.
Yeah.
So at the bottom of my pot, I had dropped a little bit of color here, and
Mhm.
it's dried up.
Yeah.
How do I blend that out so it looks a little bit more seamless?
Make the same base coat again, the same wash from left to right that we had done, but
Over that.
wait for this to dry. So the
Okay.
entire surface of the teapot, repaint that base coat.
Okay.
So what will happen is the pigments that are right now just about settled on the surface, once new water comes in, it's like a wave coming in.
Mhm.
So they get a little dislodged, they reposition themselves and settle down. So when you're making that wash, make it with a very light hand and make it exactly like how we painted the first wash. Don't stop there to actively blend anything. Just go with the flow, literally, and as that color settles, it will reduce the contrast that you already have. It will add more pigment to the existing pigment, so it will brighten that up also. And that point where the color has left you dissatisfied, that will also shift a little bit, and it might smoothen itself out.
I'll try that out. And when I'm doing the wash again, I just let the color settle at the like closer to the spout, right? Like I hold it the
Yes,
same.
exactly how we did
Okay.
it before.
Okay. Try that.
Okay. How's yours looking, Ashita? Okay. Wait, you're on mute.
The contrast of the two. So I think I'll also have to do the same thing, like do a
Yeah.
overall wash on it.
Yeah. Now, in your case, you need not use the scarlet at all. You could just do an entire wash of gamboge and very little orange in that, so it'll just brighten everything up. So very often when we do washes, the wash can be of a completely different color also. It does not have to be the exact same wash. You have to figure out what you need, and then you add only that uh, which is going to change the existing in favor of what you where you're headed. Cool.
So the
So
wash, now we begin again the same direction like how we did
yeah,
the
yes,
light side first and then move to the dark.
correct. And the reason for that is because if you start from the dark side, if there is too much pigment and it dislodges, it will come into the light side and you might just make everything too even. So you want to just be careful about that. So you could use the rest of the week to practice the remaining containers. You can, painting it would be pretty similar. Just try to figure out the colors and shades. And there's a likelihood that when you mix these colors up, you can get something that's looking too brown or too blue or too green or whatever. Let that be. This gray thing or trying to match gray will take a while, and all you need to focus is getting the highlights or getting a semblance of some of the highlights and the shadows. Don't be too hung up on getting the exact shade. We don't really have to worry about that. Okay, cool. So next week we won't have class because I will be in Jaipur, and we'll have the next class on the 27th. Is it 27th or 26th? I think it'll be 27th, right? No, why is it? I'm very confused. Today is Wednesday. Yeah, correct, 27th. That's right. Sorry.
27th.
It's 2 weeks. I'm, I'm, I'm thinking it should be a little earlier than 27th. That is the 20th, which we are not having class. Right. So 27th would be the next class. And then we will have missed 2 classes this month, which we'll make up for sometime in December. But in the meantime, I will share with you what I've done in the other classes, like the Saturday classes. So, what I can, I'm going to try and see, there's a setting by which everyone has to be admitted into this session. But otherwise, I'll change that setting so you all can just get onto the room without me approving. So, if you want, if you have the time next Wednesday, you can sit together and do this exercise. You could probably do this exercise, or you could watch the a previous recording, watch it on your own device, but then sit together and see how you can do, if there are any problems that you or questions that you come up with. Okay, and most importantly, if you do watch the video, please do a thumbs up and subscribe and all that stuff that you have to do, and definitely leave a comment. So even with the classes that we do, even if you don't watch the video later on, it'll be really nice to once in a while just go onto YouTube, go to the Wednesday playlist, and just leave some comments on what you thought about the class. One is it gives me feedback, and second, there are lots of people from the other classes who are, or people from the live session who, when I'm not over here, watch these. So when there is some feedback, they know what they're looking for. They can really choose the right video. Okay, so that I'll really appreciate. Okay, so that's it for tonight then. Thank you for
Thank you.
attending. I, I'm so glad we managed. I get very
I
scared
know
of classes just not happening, but we have to make it happen.
December is again a very bad month.
Yeah, I know. This whole
So
October, November, December is usually this way. Then hopefully from Jan things stabilize. But let's see.
yeah.
We'll do whatever we can as much as we can. Okay, chalo. See you. Bye. Good night.
Bye bye. Good night.